Welcome to this week's edition of the WIA Pod. I'm Verona Frankish and I'm the proud chair of the WIA board. As you know, each week we bring you stories from some of the most remarkable people within our WIA community, and this week is no exception. A huge thanks must also go to our sponsor, Digital Sparks, who are massive supporters of the pod and also facilitate bringing this to you so professionally every single week. So welcome to this week's WIA Pod. My guest this week on the WIA Pod is another phenomenal woman, an agent for Fine and Country in a beautiful part of the country, and she was recommended by our very good friend Ben Madden. Welcome to this week's guest, Abbie Young.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining us on the pod, and I know it's been a bit of a trek for you to come from home today, so well done firstly on getting here, and I know you're very proud of yourself, which is amazing.
I am, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm glad to be here.
Well, Abbie, as I mentioned, you were recommended by Ben, and he told me specifically that he was super inspired by the conversations that he'd had with you one night over dinner. I think it was a group setting, by the way. Yeah. But I think we'll pick some of those things up in the conversation. But let's start off where it all began for you, because I know you haven't always been in a estate agency, and actually, like me, you started in retail. So tell me a little bit about that.
I was a shop manager in the City of Bath for many years, a family-run business, and they looked after me very, very well. So it suited me with young children, and it was a confectionery business. So I made the confectionery as well. So
oh wow,
yeah, it was a lovely environment to be in, and I was very lucky to be there. But circumstances changed, and that's how I had to find a career. 2 young children, divorce, became a single mother, and something had to change. So
wow,
yeah.
So you had 2 young children, became a single mum. That can't have been easy.
No.
And how old were your children when that happened?
So around 4 and 7. Ultimately.
And what tell me about your children?
Oh, 2 lovely boys, very proud of them. Birthday today for Isaac, so
oh, wow.
Happy birthday, Isaac.
So Isaac is the oldest?
He's the oldest, he's 23 today.
And your other son?
19, Joseph.
Joseph, yeah. Isaac and Joseph. So when you find yourself single after a divorce, which in itself is traumatic, you wanted to find a career. So tell me a little bit about why you decided, oh, now is the time for me to have a career, as opposed to let me just get the kids, you know, through school and have a stable job. That's quite an interesting juncture to change your position.
Yeah, absolutely.
Talk to me about that.
I think financial situation is the most difficult.
Sure.
Becoming a single mum, I'm sure most mums would agree. So although I loved my job and I loved where I was, it just wasn't going to be enough to be able to support 2 young boys, you know, until they're old enough to support themselves.
Sure.
So I was quite lucky. I bought my first house with my then partner when I was just 24. And I really got hooked on the adrenaline and the highs and lows of that process. So it was a very exciting time, but also missed out on a few houses that we wanted, outbid by, you know, local developers.
The roller coaster of agency.
Absolutely. But I realised how much I actually enjoyed it afterwards, and it sort of gave me a mindset to maybe have a look at that as a career. At the time, with so much going on, I couldn't do it, but eventually it got to the stage where I was more settled, and eventually met a new partner and relocated, and I knew that that was the right time for me to pursue that goal.
Amazing.
And that role.
So how did you pursue it? In what way? How did you get into estate agency?
I got lucky. I had a lucky break. So I was looking for a property to buy in the new location. And
where was this? Where were you now?
In the Forest of Dean.
Okay.
At that time. And I noticed a sign in the window looking for staff. So I put my CV together and sent it off, not really expecting to even get a response, because I had no experience in that role. And but they did. They called me in and had an interview, and they liked me based on. I guess the great thing about this career is a lot of it is about your personality.
Of course.
You know, and
retail is a brilliant grounding for that, because it's all about people, customer service, and actually I learned a lot in my career, because I've also spent quite a lot of my career in retail. It's about, if you are confident about the product that you're selling and you can strongly advocate for it authentically, then you can pretty much sell anything.
Absolutely. I think that's key. That's really important.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, they gave me an opportunity, and I'm really grateful for that opportunity.
So
to this
you
day.
started in a negotiator role?
In a negotiator role. It was a great grounding, great place to start, because the role was so varied. I learned every single aspect of a estate agency straight away, which again, I'm really grateful for that now as well. And it allowed me to sort of explore and work out which aspect I like best to ultimately pursue that, which is what I'm doing now. But yeah, it was very male-dominated industry at that time, even just sort of 15 years ago, and there weren't many female negotiators in the role. Luckily for me, I had a great mentor. My manager, she was female, and she taught me everything that I needed to know. And I was just on the train up here today, I was just thinking about that and reminiscing about it. And I think it was on my first day, she said to me, "Shake my hand." I thought, well, so I did. She said, "It's too weak. You need to improve. Shake my hand again." And I shook it. And
she was
said, "That's
preparing
better."
you.
So, and I've never forgotten that. And it's something that I've taught other people that I've trained to this day. And she knew, she'd already navigated her way through a long time before me in that role. And she taught me everything she knew at the time. So again,
So
gratitude,
there's
grateful.
so much about what you've just said that I want to unpack a little bit. So the first thing is, you mentioned that even 15 years ago, it was very, very male dominated. What did that look like for you as you stepped into a new industry and environment? How did you feel back then, and what did that look like in terms of that male domination, and how did it make you feel?
Yeah, I think I was very excited. I always had a lot of energy to put into something, and I never really knew where to channel it. So to have this, you know, exciting opportunity, I really threw myself into it. And I was very lucky. The team that I fell into were mainly male, but also really supportive and encouraging. So from that aspect, I was very lucky. I think they also had young children at the time, but there's a big difference. And what I sort of found was that they generally had females, maybe wives, partners at home to take care of the children when they're ill, or if something happens, or school run. Whereas, I mean, I couldn't have done it without my family. First of all, they've just been a huge support, and also my partner. So without them, I couldn't have done it, and I had all of that. But still, you know, children want mums, and for some things, you have to be there. And I think that was the main difference at the time. There were times where it became, the hours were so long. So, you know, at that time we were working 8:30 a.m. till 7 p.m. That was our hours. So you can imagine
it's a long day.
And it's, you know, you could, with this industry, you could work 24 hours. It just never stops.
Yeah.
So, you know, quite often you're not finishing at 7, you're rolling on from that. But
I think now there's more of a balance, though, because if you are doing those hours, sometimes you're doing some of it in an office, some of it at home, or a lot of it from home. But to be locked in an office from 8:30 till 7, particularly when you're raising a young family, that's challenging.
It was.
How did you manage that, the juggle of the priorities? I know you said you had a lot of support from family. It takes a village to raise a child. I know this. But there's also the mental kind of the guilt that sits within you. You never feel like you're doing anything particularly well. How did you manage that?
I decided right from the beginning that I wasn't going to feel guilty, because I made a choice. And the choice was either to be at home and struggle and not be able to give them what I felt they needed, or to throw myself into a career where I wasn't as present as maybe other mums would be. But it was about quality time and being able to spend quality time with them, and, you know, work hard to give them what they needed. So I decided early on, there's no point feeling guilty. I had a decision to make, and I made it. I have no regrets. And
I absolutely love that, Abbie.
Yeah.
And, you know, you're so right, because so much of how we approach our life is about choice.
Yeah.
And if we make an intentional decision about a particular topic, in some ways it alleviates so much of the additional pressure and stress that we put on our own shoulders, where if we don't make that decision, then we're dragged into something, then we're constantly carrying this additional load of guilt on our shoulders, and it's not healthy.
No, it's not healthy, and I think it's, you know, that's a choice in itself.
Yeah.
You choose to be guilty. Why?
Yeah.
You know, you have a choice and you do your
It
best.
doesn't change the situation,
No,
right?
and you do the best with the tools that you have at the time.
Exactly.
And actually, I think they've got a great work ethic now. They know that everything they've had has been worked hard for. And the two of them, they're born salesmen. They're entrepreneurial, so they've gained, you know, from
Absolutely.
being in that environment.
The apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
Exactly.
I bet they are so proud of you, and to look at their mum, who's been, you know, a trailblazer and built her own independent lifestyle, they must be so proud of you. Well done, because that's not easy. You know, I know this. So I just want to also just go back on the first manager that you had in that branch, and so much of all of our careers are, we can pinpoint the people who have influenced and have guided us and mentored and coached us along the way. She sounds like she was a phenomenal woman. Yeah. What role has mentoring and coaching and, you know, people that you can take advice from, what role have they played in your career?
Oh, gosh, I was surrounded by wonderful people immediately. So I think I think men and women bring something so different to the table, and I definitely learned from both. And I was like a hoovering it all up. But yeah, I think everyone that I met initially, they believed in me and they gave me the platform, and they really showed me they wanted me to succeed. And I think that's the difference between a great leader, you know, and not really. That people that you train, you train them to be almost better than you.
Absolutely. So it removes an ego from the situation, and they want to help you achieve your potential.
Absolutely. And I felt that I had that from both my male and female peers at the beginning. There were definitely differences. So one thing that stands out to me, eventually, because we were working, or the expectation was to work between probably 50 and 70 hours a week, which is incredibly difficult for anyone, let alone somebody with responsibilities. And they did try and help me, so they gave me a little bit of leeway, but that was also difficult. So, for example, they allowed me to come in sort of rather than 8:30 a.m. just after 9 o'clock. But when you come in, you're not the same as everyone else.
You're not starting on a level playing field because you've missed the morning meeting, or you've missed the interactions prior. Yeah.
And I'd be greeted by, you know, oh, afternoon, Abbie.
Wow.
Which was just banter at the time. It was all good fun, and we were all great friends. But deep down,
it
after
erodes,
a period of
doesn't
time,
it? Yeah, it does.
It was. And, you know, I had to work so much harder, I feel, just to keep up, to try and be on the same, you know, platform and level as everyone else. And I found if I wasn't there as much, other people would have to take over my responsibilities and my role, giving them even more. So even though, you know, the managers tried to help me by giving me that flexibility, really it was just putting
additional pressure
on everybody else.
Yeah.
And I wasn't comfortable with that either. So it was really difficult to find a balance. Really very difficult at the time.
So tell me then how you progress through your different roles in agency, because clearly you're not negotiating anymore. You've a much more senior job now. So tell me about how you progressed.
So I found I really enjoyed training some of, even in my first role, I was there for around 5 or 6 years, and I found that I really enjoyed training the you know, the new staff, the new people that came in, and I also found my passion with the higher end of the market. So, and I think that was just because it's more of an event when you showcase a house, you know, from start to finish. It takes more time. For me, it was more exciting, and everyone's different. So that was ultimately what I pursued. I did I've moved house quite a few times.
It's an occupational hazard.
It is, and I moved area slightly. So I live very much on the Gloucestershire, Monmouthshire and Herefordshire borders. So just to move a few miles, you can actually move into another country. So you're either in Wales or England or across a county. So I moved for my son. My eldest son's dyslexic. So I found a great school that would help him in the Monmouth area. So we moved sort of lock, stock and barrel to make commutes and things to school a lot easier. And at the same time, I just felt that it was time to move on from my first role to my next one. Applied to an agency where really they solely dealt with mostly the higher end of the market and the more complicated
and take
properties.
Longer.
Absolutely. That's
more
it.
demanding clients, all of the above.
Absolutely. And working for different agencies, you do gain more knowledge, more experience, because every single one is so different. I value the different agents that I work for, really happy with my current role.
Amazing.
At Fine & Country.
So one of the things we share a lot in common, Abbie. We had a little chat earlier, and both divorced when our children are young, and now our children are older. So our lives have changed and things are a bit different now. Today, my youngest is 13, first day at school, but the other two have off to uni and living on their own and, doing different things in their lives. And it's funny how when the children have grown, you almost forget how difficult it was back in the day, right? Because your brain is kind, it helps you forget the things you don't need to remember. But yet other challenges throw themselves at us at a woman of a certain age. And we talked about the fact that you're now in perimenopause, and that presents different challenges. So tell me a little bit about how that has manifested itself in your life, both personally and professionally, if you don't mind.
No, it's Mother Nature's little joke, isn't it? It feels like.
Well, she's telling us we can deal with it. That's what I keep saying.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, just stepping back slightly, when my eldest son left school, the school I found for him was an independent school. And it was so much financial pressure at the time because I had to find the additional funds in order to be able to fund that. And I imagined that when he finished school, at the end of that, I'd be woohoo, big party.
I have had a pay increase.
Absolutely. I'd be, and actually the complete opposite happened. I had a little emotional, I think I just cried for about 2 weeks solid. And I think it was just that moment where it had finished, it had stopped. And my mind, instead of moving sort of forward to a party, it took me back to everything that I'd been through and, the fight. And it was like the fight stopped. And it was almost a bit of a grieving process. It was quite bizarre. And it knocked me for six because I wasn't expecting it at all. And I worked through, worked through that and all of the emotion that sort of goes with that.
It's so interesting how that happens because you can relate on a much smaller scale. When we go on holiday, we work so hard to get to holiday, and then all of a sudden you get sick, or you get a cold, or I get cold sores, and I think it's just your body going. It is a little bit of a sort of PTSD kind of experience. So I can totally relate, but your point is you weren't expecting it, and therefore it's more of a blow.
And it was a huge example of what you've just described, and eventually I had to, and then they were in the process, he went off to study elsewhere, so there's a grieving process of that as well. And then finally you get to a position where you think, oh, actually, I have got my life back a little bit. I've got this sort of freedom. And then Mother Nature hits you with something else, and all of a sudden you're trying to navigate that with dry hair, elastic waistbands.
Absolutely.
And brain fog, and and trying to deal with that huge change as a female, as well as keeping quite a high-powered, stressful role. So I've been, lately trying to manage that. Luckily, I've got a lovely team of men and women around me at the moment. And
do you talk to them about it?
Yeah, definitely. Not so much the men, although they listen in on the conversations, and we say, it's okay. We're giving you. Some of them are a bit younger, so we sort of say, oh, we're helping out your your wife and your partner.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you know? I think it's so important to have this conversation, and because it is one of the one of the taboos, I guess, that is starting to become more commonplace to discuss it. But I talk about it with my team. My leadership team are 60-40 percentage men and women, and I talk about it because I think you're absolutely right that it's not just about me or, you know, their wife or partner at some point in the future. It's about their sisters. It's about their colleagues. It's about the people that they're leading and managing, and it's important that they understand that, you know, it affects everybody in different ways, and it's also important that we don't push it under the carpet, because then you feel unseen and unheard. And it's really important that when you are struggling, that people know that you are and can support you.
Yeah, and I'm relieved that we can have those conversations, and we've
Me
probably
too.
got Davina McCall to, you know, ultimately to thank for that. But even if I'm at appointments and, you know, suddenly I get too hot, or, you know, I'm...
Take your jacket off.
Yeah, or,
yeah, exactly.
you know, suddenly we're having a conversation and the brain fog sets in.
Yeah.
Even on an appointment, I'm confident enough to... I think if you don't, it can really... At the beginning, it really affected my confidence, because I wasn't sure what was happening, and I started to wonder, you know, whether, oh, you know, maybe I can't do this anymore. I've definitely had those thoughts.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, listening to sort of Davina McCall again, and you know, the statistics for women stepping out of their roles,
It's frightening.
Is frightening. And I thought, that's not going to be me. It's not possible. So even on appointments, I'll talk about it, and most of the women there, they'll say, oh, you know, totally understand. Oh, you know, it'll be me in a minute as well. So, you know.
But you know, your point about people walking away from roles, right? When you think about everything we've just talked about, right? Women have demonstrated time and time again that they have the ability to multitask, to deal with a lot of stress, a lot of pressure, to be supportive of other people whilst going through a lot of challenge themselves. Then they step into when their kids then have... they're beyond childbearing years, their kids have grown up, they have the independence, the freedom and the desire to fill a need in themselves, and they don't need to fill those needs in their children anymore. And they've got all this time now to really throw into, very passionately into their jobs. And then they're thrown this curved ball. And when you get through, because I'm thankfully kind of coming out the other side, I'm full menopause, but I'm HRT'd up and it's wonderful. And I feel great now, and I've had real challenge in the middle of all of that. But I feel like probably in terms of my ability to do my job at the best phase I've ever been in my life, because my children are more grown up and people are less needy of me. And this is now my time. And if I was forced to leave my role because of this curveball that wasn't my fault, that would seem really harsh, right?
Absolutely.
And therefore, I think it's really important that we acknowledge that in our teams as well.
I agree, absolutely. And it should be the same for everybody.
Absolutely.
I feel so. I'm very lucky. I've got lovely ladies surrounding me. We're all going through a similar thing, so we're all comparing our lion's mane mushrooms and and collagen and everything else. But I mean, what a relief, because it takes the pressure off. It does give you a safe space in which to, you know, talk about things and laugh. I think laughter's quite important, which I discovered quite early on. I think if you let it affect your confidence, then you could go the other way. But I feel if you can laugh about it. I mean, I had an experience the other day where I had to deliver some paperwork to a client, and they weren't at home, but they had a Ring doorbell. So I rang the doorbell so they could see me as well as listen. And I was trying to explain to them that I couldn't fit the paperwork because the letterbox was too small. And I was looking at the letterbox, but I couldn't think of the word for letterbox. And it was just an almighty pause, which felt like 10 minutes. And all of a sudden, his voice interjected and said, letterbox?
Brilliant.
And I sort of said,
yeah,
okay. He said, oh, just leave it around the back. I was like, okay, thank you.
Brilliant. And I totally relate to that. Sometimes whenever I was speaking, I entered menopause, and without really realising it, at the same time that I started this job, so just over 4 years ago, and I didn't recognise that it was menopause, and I thought it's just, you know, additional pressure from the job. And I remember being midway through conversations, and the next word could have been house, you know, and I literally couldn't think of the next normal word. So I totally relate. And you have to feel like, well, I had to feel like I was sort of styling it out, and pregnant pauses, and, you know, and it's only now that I recognise that during that early year, particularly before I've been medicated, that that it was full-on menopause. So yeah, it's, as you say, Mother Nature's little joke.
Absolutely, and I try and be myself as much as possible, and not hide too much how I'm feeling, because I think, especially in this industry, you learn that the old cliche, people buy people, and I think the more open and honest you are when you're sitting around somebody's table, when you've been to their property, the more received that you are. I consider myself very ordinary, very average, but I think that really helps me. I've been through what a lot of people are going through when I go to their house, and I'm valuing their house and I'm praising their house. Quite often it's because they've got something going on in their personal life. And if you've been through, a divorce, if you've had death of loved ones, if you're raising children by yourself, if you're going through menopause, you can relate to most people, that you go and see. You've been through most things that they're going for. And I think that gives you a really deep connection with somebody at the time. And that's a very powerful tool. So I think we all go through things, and rather than letting them overwhelm us and get on top of us, if we can just use those tools, to help us and relate to other people, I think much better.
Do you know, Abbie, you're so right. And a lot of what you've just said is ordinary experiences that happen to ordinary folk every single day.
Absolutely.
And our job is to help them navigate that situation with kindness and with care. I will challenge you and say you're far from ordinary. The things that you've been able to achieve and how you've been able to achieve it is quite extraordinary, trust me. So don't minimise a lot of what you've achieved, because I think you're doing a phenomenal job and you've raised two amazing sons. So nothing about that is ordinary. I want to just move on to women in a state agency, because obviously you talk about safe space and you talk about having the ability to be ourselves despite some of the challenges. What part has women in a state agency played in your experience in this industry?
I think just having a safe space where you can go and discuss sort of how you're feeling. I know there's the apps and things that are available solely for women. I think it's lovely to have that safe space, but I also think it's fantastic that men are very included in that as well. So yeah, I think it's lovely to have that available to us. It certainly wasn't available, when I was first started out in my career. So the more that we've got available, the better.
And you make a really good point, because we cannot improve this industry, we cannot improve equality in any world on our own.
No.
And that's a big thing about women in a state agency. Together we thrive, because we need to make the change in partnership. And so much of that change is about educating and helping men to understand some of our challenges from a different lens. Sure. And it's quite often it's not because they're not empathetic to it, but often it's because they didn't acknowledge it or didn't see it or didn't know it existed. Yeah. So education is a big part, as well as anything else. So believe it or not, our time has come to an end, and I have one final question for you, which is, who would you like to see on the WIA pod in the future? Oh gosh. Difficult to say. I think it would be really fun to have maybe one of the oldest people in a state agency alongside one of the youngest. Okay. I'd love to see, the wisdom that comes with that maturity. The juxtaposition of the two. And and that sort of fresh energy of the young. So I don't know who they are. Okay. Oh. That could be an awkward question. We'd have to. Who's the oldest in the industry? Let's figure that one out. I don't know. I would never change. I'm not putting any names in there for now. That's for sure. But no, I think that would be really interesting. I think your point actually about how much the industry has changed in 15 years, and even the entry point to a state agency has changed significantly. You can be a couple of years in the industry now, and you can set up your own business, your own brand with your name above the door, whether that's a high street branch or whether that's a virtual door. There is so much more choice today, and that makes for a better industry.
Absolutely.
So, you know, that can only be a good thing for women and for men.
Agreed, yeah.
Abbie, thank you so much for sharing so authentically, so openly, and never call yourself ordinary again, because you're quite extraordinary.
Oh, thank you for having me.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
And that's it for this week's edition of the WEA Pod.